We also have the Insectoid. Not a fun group necessarily because they are very frightening to look at. In fact, the first ET I ever saw when I was about 5.5 years old was like this, only it didn't have the mask over the lower face as it did in this case. And it was very terrifying to see this thing and not know how I had gotten out in the backyard to be with this creature, and it telling me it was my mother was very upsetting. I thought I knew better. But the insectoid type do differ from the little grays. For instance, as this person's drawing can show us a little bit, there seems to be a very bony, high, hard ridge over the eyes. And more often the eyes are round and bulging like fly eyes, if you will, rather than the elongated or almond or smooth, shiny black eyes. The face in this drawing is covered by a mask of some sort. Now, we've had other cases where the aliens have used masks and said, we don't want to frighten you. We don't know why this one was using a mask. It was performing surgical procedures, but normally they're not that tidy about keeping the gloves and the mask on. The body being very, very thin and white. The person who had this experience and drew this was on a table paralyzed with his head pushed very far back, and this is all he could see from his ankles. He couldn't move. He said the arms tapered to a thickness no more than a broomstick handle. And he did his best to show the long, thin fingers of the hand, but he said, honestly, from his viewpoint, he could only see a small thumb-like device and one finger, although he thought there was probably one or two more. He just couldn't see this, so he wouldn't draw it. Then we have the little leathery-skinned dark creatures with the slit eyes, and I call them Reptoid for lack of a better term. They've got Reptoid eyes, they seem to have a leathery dark skin texture, they're often robust, reported with webbed appendages, often clawed, and with pretty good working teeth. So these are not like the little grays or the insectoids, and these seem to be a little rougher and more aggressive, and are often reported involved in sexual indiscretions that abductees report. But these are not all we have. We have the humanoids. Alright, in one of the encounters here, where you saw the 4 ETs in front of the big light that was like an elongated moon, the woman was abducted to a facility that seemed to be underground, seemed to be inhabited by both the ETs and humans, and these 3 men, there were 3 men in the encounter dealing with her, appeared to all intents and purposes to be human except for the eyes of the central ones, which were reptilian. And the woman had the feeling that the other person may have, this man on your left may also have been, because she knew he had contact coverings over his eyes, so he may have been disguising the reptoid slit as well, but everything else looked very human. And then we have the blondes, we have the black-haired little peak humanoids, we have the blue creatures, the dwarfs, and many varieties of reports, and there may be a lot of illusion involved in this, maybe a lot of deception in it, but it's certainly not just one particular type that people are encountering and reporting. And what's I think upsetting to the theorists is that we have enough cases where if you look at them, every conceivable combination of ET types is reported working together in the scenario. Blondes with reptoids, reptoids with Whittapeak, insects with all of them, and it's the grays ubiquitously among them. Humanoids, reptoids, insectoids, and grays in every combination you can think of. We also have those that shapeshift in front of the abductee's eyes, and I'll talk about this a little bit more if we get some time. I'm trying to rush so we won't keep you here too long. But they change from one feature to another or one form to another. So, not only do we have all of these in the encounters, we also have, and I'll get to this, I can't resist because it was one of my personal experiences as well as many others, the Jesus figures. And I think it's always funny because Jesus usually turns out being blonde and blue-eyed in these encounters, unlike the real thing probably would have been. They've been looking at the pictures at Woolworths before they make that time. Okay. Now, you've heard about the crossbreeding theories, and they're doing, to upgrade their race, upgrade our race, whatever, they're doing a hybrid species, and we have a lot of corroborating evidence from the fetal nurseries that many people report. And this is very typical of what people all over the country for a long time have reported seeing. Nurseries where the little jars with the liquids are growing little fetuses in various stages of growth, and more or less partially human, partially gray looking. And then, of course, these are followed by the presentation of hybrid-looking babies. And there's either try to bond with it, or try to feed it, or try to hold it, or whatever. But they always take the babies back. Now, this is not meant to be overly disturbing to anyone, but along the same lines as having these hybrid fetus nurseries where these wonderful things like baby presentations take place, we have at least 2 cases in ours, and this isn't a lot, but every anomaly has something to teach us, and we should pay attention to the unique items, perhaps even more than the pattern items, because that's where we're going to learn new information. We have at least 2 cases of women who have been in the fetal nursery scenarios where they have seen the ET deliberately destroy the fetus in one of the containers, and one person said they blended it like a milkshake. And when the woman was aghast and protested vigorously the destruction of this fetus, the ET in effect said, "What are you getting so upset about? It's not really alive, and we're not going to waste any material. It'll all be recycled." So, how do we fit these into the categories? We're going to try to hold the questions to the end if we can, and so I make sure I get through everything before you all have to sit here forever. We also have a case that I'd really like to have time to report on, and I will in the book. I know we're short on time now, so I won't, but where a fetus was implanted, and then the woman miscarried it rather than had a retrieval and was programmed to hide the fetus for its retrieval later by the ETs, and when she had a chance to ask them in a subsequent encounter why they did this to her, they gave her an excuse for why the baby or the fetus didn't grow, something about beta protoplasm, and then said, "But we programmed you to hide the fetus." So they knew in advance, obviously, this was not going to be a viable fetal situation. Why would they put her through this? She had been trying for several years desperately to get pregnant. She was thrilled. She was a UFO virgin, if you will. She didn't know that when they come put the fetuses in, they also come and get them. She thought they'd given her a gift. She was going to have that baby she had wanted forever. And she was terribly devastated physically and emotionally by the loss of the fetus. And yet realizing after the second encounter with their explanation, they knew she was going to lose it. They knew they weren't going to use it because it was buried in a jar of water in the barn. That's where they programmed her to put it. Seemed to me to not be anything really to do in that case with crossbreeding. Thank you. All right. We have reports of the taking of human physical energy and human emotional energy, sudden collapse and fatigue, sometimes for an entire group and a family, sometimes for one individual from anywhere from 15 minutes to maybe an hour or more. We also have scenarios where the abductee and the ET seem to merge. I've been through this. It's very hard to explain until you felt it, but you understand what I'm talking about. There is a merging of the consciousness, the emotions, perceptions, and we don't know what this is all about, except that it does frequently happen, that the ET and the person begin to see or feel through each other for some reason in this scenario. And it's always temporary, and it's upsetting sometimes and very enlightening and uplifting other times. We also have scenarios in the encounter situation where highly emotional, oftentimes disturbing scenarios are made to be relived over and over by the abductee, apparently for the purpose of studying either the person's emotional response, or in one case, one well-known abductee who I will not name, who had a very frightening encounter, and then after the frightening encounter was over, was placed in a chair with a headphone-type device. A little ET sat down in a chair next to him, put on a similar headphone-type device, and the abductee immediately was reliving this terrifying encounter, as if it were really happening, just as if it were real. No sense that this was a repeat. It was happening. And when it was over, he's still sitting in the chair, of course, until the ET gets up and another gets in, puts on a hat, and the guy goes through it again. This happens over and over. So maybe it's just virtual reality movie time or something. But every scenario felt as real as the first time. High emotional situations in which there's a lot of energy expended and compulsions and obsessions are imposed on abductees after enduring these ongoing encounters, and they often are very destructive to the person's personal relationships. Job losses occur because of some of these. Families break up over them, and people have even ended up getting arrested because of these. What they mean, that's up to us to try to figure out, but to rule these things out because they don't fit into a neat theory is to overlook what people on the abduction and contact level are really going through. And more disturbing, at least, I think, for the people themselves as well as for the family and friends around them, are the situations where the ETs actually take over the abductee's body and actions. Sometimes literally unplugging the consciousness of the person so that the person has no memory of any of what goes on during that encounter. But very often, almost cruelly not unplugging the person so that they see what is being done and cannot stop it. We have cases, if we had time, we could talk about, but with 25 minutes and trying to give you time, I'll save that for maybe some private discussions, and certainly it will be part of the material in a couple of the cases we'll be reporting on in the next book. Changes resulting in the person's abductee's personality, values, and needs. These turn up time and time again as well, sometimes for the betterment, sometimes for the detriment of the person. Also reports of abductee doppelgangers. I think we need to pay some attention to cases in which an abductee is reported verifiably by non-abducted people to be in two places at once, which can't be, according to what we understand. And in one of these situations is not part of the person's memory or experiences. And sometimes these are amusing, sometimes they're very frightening. And I have examples, we'll skip over those right now to material. Abductees forced into sexual activity. Again, we've got to think about what theories might this bolster, what theories might it contradict. Sometimes the sex is abductee with ET, or abductee with ET and dildo, if you will. Some sort of device that is not part of the ET's anatomy. We have several cases I'd love to be able to go into on this, but I think it's important to keep going that, in fact, we have children who are engaged in sexual manipulations. And I will talk about just one case here because this is, as a parent and a grandparent, very, very important to me that we try to get a handle on why they're doing this to their children. A woman who was having an ongoing series of encounters in Florida was pretty happy with and had been given some good information. She felt she was being helped. She wasn't really being harmed. She was occasionally, well, actually more than occasionally, involved in sexual activity, but as she said, it was some of the best sex she ever had, so what was she going to complain about? However, she did begin to complain when one morning she found her 5-year-old daughter sexually molesting her 3-year-old daughter, and when she aghast, trying to figure out what was going on, why this 5-year-old was doing it, the 5-year-old said, but Mommy, I'm just doing to her what the little doctors do to us at night. And it wasn't just examinations. And then there are cases where abductees in groups are forced to have sex with each other. Now, I don't know what that may have to do with any of these programs. Maybe it's just entertainment, but certainly doesn't seem to be part of the breeding program because nothing is being retrieved after these sexual encounters, and in many cases the people are highly, highly terrified, humiliated, and not happy about the experiences. We also have a growing body of evidence that shows that the ETs are doing clones of human bodies. Sometimes of the individual, the abductee, over and over again. We have abductees who have been shown their new bodies in storage. One person told it's for the resurrection. Jesus said you get a new body at resurrection. Well, this is it. We're saving it for you. In another case, a man, a young teenager was told if we can use this body to replace you and nobody will ever know, so you don't want to basically not go along with our program. We can replace you if you don't like what you're doing. And so we get a variety in between those two of the explanation of what the clone bodies are for. Sometimes they're not a copy of the abductee. Sometimes they're simply reproduced numbers of the same body. For instance, 20 or 30 women's bodies in Earth, they're all identical. 20 or 30 men's bodies, all identical. Pretty good-looking specimens for the most part, too. What they're doing with cloning, they've got it down now. We need to find out why. And then the reports of humans and ETs working together. Again, things that a lot of the mainstream researchers really don't want to mess with or don't want to get into or try to dismiss as confabulation, fantasy, misperception, or whatever. I'm sorry, the evidence is pretty strong on this. For instance, 3 women in New Mexico abducted a few years back, taken to what appeared to be an underground facility with both human and alien inhabitants doing a variety of what appeared to be scientific activities. One woman was taken to one room where she underwent the typical gynecological and other sort of physical exam. The second woman was also taken to a separate room. We still do not know what happened to her because she couldn't remember consciously, and under hypnosis all she did was scream. And the third woman was taken into what appeared to be a computer or equipment type room, large operations room, where she said, I went over to the dressing area, put on my uniform, which matched those of the ETs, sat down at the computer, punched in my code, and began to work. I had no idea what she was doing, but she was doing it. We also had many reports of abductees in examinations by the ETs where there is at least one human, often female, doctor involved.